Midnight. My phone rang. A police officer's voice cut through the dark. Your nephew was abandoned in the mountains. I drove like I had fire in my chest. He was only 5, covered in dirt, shaking, crying. He whispered, "Mom said I'm not wanted because of her new husband." I pulled him into my arms, swearing he would never feel unwanted again. For 10 years, I raised him as my own. But then she came back, draped in silk and diamonds, looking straight at me. "He's my son. I've come to take him." And in front of everyone, my nephew turned to her and said, "I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments? Or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reach. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. And if my story touches you, please consider subscribing to this channel. Every voice, every listener, gives me strength to keep sharing stories that often go unheard. My name is Aria, and this is the story of the night I became a mother when no one else wanted to be. February in Asheville felt like the mountains were holding their breath. My little apartment at the edge of the pines was cold that morning, the heater rattling like an old snare, coffee hissing on the stove. I sat hunched over a freelance mock-up. I didn't care about chasing a client's shade of blue across a screen that made my eyes ache. 5 minutes and my fingers drifted to the guitar propped against the wall. One quiet strum and the apartment changed shape, less drywall and rent due, more ridgeline and air thin enough to sting the lungs. I wrote on a scrap torn from an invoice, "Music is the wind that carries me forward." I tucked it under the bridge like a secret. That night, I played the old fiddle, a bar that smelled like wet wood and memory. The stage was a raised plank barely higher than the boots tracking across it. My set was 20 minutes, 2 originals and a cover because the bartender liked it that way. I picked through the song that had been lingering in my hand, something about breath and distance, and the way trees sing when no one is listening. When I finished, an older man in a denim jacket lifted his glass. "Girl, you play like Gideon Quill used to back in Nashville." He said it like a blessing. My chest tightened. Gideon was my grandfather, and hearing his name here was like hearing it echo off the porch back home, cigarette smoke and laughter braided with summer crickets. I thanked the man, tipped the busboy with my last 2 singles, and packed up before the crowd remembered to forget me. Sunday dinner at my parents' house has never been optional. Their place is a 2-story wooden box in the middle of Asheville, the kind of home that smells like cornbread before you reach the front walk. Inside, everything has a label. The good plates. The winter throws the tone you use when you talk about a future that looks like a 401k. I kissed my grandmother Willow on the cheek. She still kept her hands in flour most weekends and slid into my usual seat. It took my father Rowan exactly 3 bites to clear his throat. So he said, tapping his fork against the plate, "When are you going to get a real job?" My mother Sage added a gentle dagger. "Technical work is stability. Literature and music are for after you've made sure you can pay your bills." She smiled like she was offering me hot tea for a fever she didn't believe in. Nova called in from Los Angeles, filling the laptop screen with hairspray and light. She talked about fittings and a rooftop show and how LA sunsets make you believe in expensive things. Then, too casually, she said she was thinking of taking Kai away for a long stretch. No one asked if he wanted that. No one said his name again after the subject moved to someone's promotion and a neighbor's new car. I mentioned a song I'd been sketching, something about wind combing the ridge, and the table fell into the kind of silence that makes laughter inevitable. When it came, it was soft and mean and brief. I took my plate out to the porch. The air cut clean. A wind came down off the mountain like a messenger. Willow followed with a thick slice of apple bread wrapped in a dish towel. "Music keeps your feet under you," she said, pressing the bread into my hands. "Mountain wind will take you where you're meant to go." For a beat, her gaze slipped the way it does lately, and she called me Gideon before blinking and laughing at herself. I told her I'd save the slice for breakfast even though I knew I'd eat it standing in the kitchen at midnight. Back at my apartment, I found the old cassette Gideon gave me when I was a kid. The tape hissed like a creek bed, his guitar thin but sure under the static. I hummed along and opened a fresh session on my laptop building a skeleton I called Whispers in the Ridge. Verse in D that climbs to G like the road switchbacking to the overlook, a chorus that refuses to circle the same hurt twice. I left the page open on the desk. Sometime after 1, my phone lit with an unfamiliar number from the Blue Ridge area. I watched it pulse until it died. The room silent, except for the heater's tired wheeze. I blew out the candle on my desk and stood by the window a moment longer, watching the pines bow and straighten in the dark. What is this wind carrying toward me? I wondered, not ready for an answer, and closer to it than I knew. The phone rang again just after midnight, the kind of ring that yanks you up by the spine. I fumbled for it, half tangled in a blanket, half still in the world of Gideon's cassette. A police officer's voice split the dark. They'd found a child at a deserted campsite off the Blue Ridge Parkway, a boy named Kai Quill. My name was listed as his emergency contact. For a breath, I couldn't find my shoes. Then I didn't care. I grabbed my coat and keys and drove the Jeep's engine, protesting every incline. The road climbed and curved. Snow fell in dry needles that made the high beams look like static. The wind pushed at the Jeep as if it knew I was late. When I pulled into the Ranger turnout, a lantern haloed a small shape crouched near the fire ring. He was 5 and filthy, a backpack clutched to his chest like a life preserver. His cheeks were stripe-stained, mouth firming around a sentence he didn't want to say. Mom said, "I'm not wanted," he whispered when I knelt. Because of her new husband. The words came out careful, like they'd been practiced. Something tore inside me. I wrapped my coat around him and lifted him against me, feeling rib and shoulder and fear. "You are wanted," I said into his hair, my voice steadier than I felt. "You're coming home with me." At the station, the fluorescents hummed like bees. Paperwork appeared, a pen rolled toward me, and I signed my name in the box for temporary custodian with a hand that shook once and then didn't. The officers had tried Nova's phone. Straight to voicemail. The backpack held a sweater that smelled like cigarette smoke and a postcard from Los Angeles. The back read, "Starting over without him." I flipped the card over again, hunting for some version that said something else. It didn't. We drove back through a quieter snow. Kai kept his eyes on the road ahead, as if he might learn its language and tell it where to take us. By the time we reached my building, he'd fallen asleep, thumb pressed against his palm like a promise. I carried him up the stairs, set him on the pull-out couch, made watery oatmeal because that's what I had. He didn't want it. He wanted not to be here, not to be anywhere he'd been unwanted. I tuned the guitar softly and played the melody that had found me the night before, letting it be both lullaby and oath. He watched me from under the blanket, eyes heavy, and finally slipped under. In the last seconds before sleep took him, he whispered a name that wasn't mine, and then a softer one that could be. Aunt Wind. It wasn't a title I'd ever imagined for myself, but it fit like an old sweater. Morning found us anyway. I called my parents because that's what you do when everything breaks. Rowan didn't say hello so much as deliver a verdict. You can barely keep yourself afloat. Turn the boy over to social services. Sage cried in the background, adding between breaths. He needs stability. You can't give him that. The coffee was bitter in my mouth. He's staying with me, I said, and the apartment felt less small for a second. I called the number again and again that used to belong to Nova. Voicemail. Voicemail. At noon, a detective followed up. Their report would note that the adult who abandoned the child wrote my name in the emergency contact field and left him there. I stared at the wall, at the chipped paint where my chair had bumped it 100 times. The fact slid into place. This wasn't a mistake or a miscommunication. It was a handoff with my life as the glove. I spent the afternoon transforming. The living room became a bedroom. The couch grew sheets and a pillow. I found a nightlight shaped like a small moon at the bottom of a drawer. I taped a list to the refrigerator: milk, cereal, apples, bandages, courage. I wrote an email to a client asking for an extension and another offering rush work for anyone who needed it. I scribbled a lyric on the back of an envelope: "I'll be the home the wind could never take away." That night, I played the chorus again. The apartment warmed around the sound, or maybe I only wanted it to. I tucked the blanket beneath Kai's chin and watched his breathing even out. The phone lit once more on the counter. Nova's name flashed, stayed, one heartbeat, disappeared. I didn't call back. There are silences you honor because you must. There are others you refuse because a child is sleeping in the next room and has to wake to a world where someone is waiting for him. I stood at the window until the glass fogged with my breath. Outside, the mountain leaned against the sky. The wind slapped the pines and then patted them, the strange tenderness of weather. I pressed my palm flat to the pane and spoke to the dark, in a voice I meant to be a shield. "From this night forward, I'm your home," I said, testing the weight of the words in my mouth and liking how they held. March bled into April, but winter clung to the ridges like a ghost that wouldn't leave. My apartment had turned into something I never thought I'd hold: a child's world patched together with the little I had. The couch became Kai's fortress, his blanket, a banner, his backpack tucked at the foot like a guard dog. Every morning, I walked him to the bus stop, his small hand buried in mine, his eyes darting as though the world might yank him away again. I told him the same thing each time: "I'll be right here when you get back." And when the bus wheezed into view, I stood in the cold until it swallowed him, my breath fogging the air like a vow. But promises weigh something. By night, I worked double shifts on design projects, staring at a screen until my vision blurred, sending drafts to clients who didn't care if I had slept. By dawn, I tuned the guitar soft enough not to wake him, chasing a melody I thought could hold the both of us upright. Still, exhaustion crept in a shadow I tried to outrun. Rowan and Sage didn't call often, but when they did, their voices carved at me like knives disguised as advice. "You're not fit for this responsibility," my father said one night, his tone clipped, as though I'd borrowed something from him I hadn't returned. "You barely have work steady enough to feed yourself." My mother's words came gentler but sharper for it. "He needs stability, a proper home. Don't trap him in your dreams." I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my throat dry. "He doesn't need your permission to belong here. He already does." Silence answered, heavy as lead. I hung up before their doubts could seed deeper. One evening, after Kai had gone to bed, I found him clutching the postcard from his mother, the one I couldn't bring myself to throw away. His eyes were wet, his voice small. "If she didn't want me, why did she write your name down?" I sat on the edge of the couch, brushing hair from his forehead. "Because she knew I would never walk away from you. Not ever." The answer felt half true, half armor. But Kai nodded like he wanted to believe. And maybe that was enough. Days blurred into weeks. The rhythm of lunches packed, laundry folded, late nights bent over glowing screens. Yet somewhere in the grind, I began to recognize a shift. The girl who used to drift between open mics and overdue bills was now charting bus routes, checking for fevers, memorizing homework assignments. The weight of a promise, I realized, wasn't a burden. It was ballast, keeping me steady against the storm. Then came the night I played the old fiddle again. I left Kai with Willow, who hummed old hymns while kneading dough, her memory sharp that evening. When I stepped onto the stage, guitar slung low, the air felt different. I wasn't just a singer testing songs against smoke. I was a woman carrying someone else's heartbeat in her pocket. I sang Whispers in the Ridge for the first time, and when the last chord fell, the room was still. Someone clapped slow, then faster, until the applause rose like thunder. My hands shook, but I smiled. I had found my voice, not just for me. For us. On the drive home, headlights sweeping the curves of the Blue Ridge Parkway, I thought of Gideon's tape of Willow's words of the boy asleep back at my apartment. I whispered into the wheel, "We'll be all right, Kai. We'll find our way through the wind." By summer, Kai had grown taller, his laughter brighter, though shadows still lingered in the corners of his eyes. School had ended, and he filled his days with crayons and the old acoustic guitar I let him pluck, like it was a puzzle. He wasn't afraid of the strings even when they bit his fingers. "It doesn't hurt if I'm making music," he said one afternoon, and I almost cried at the simple bravery of it. But the past doesn't stay buried, not even under the weight of new chords. It came back in envelopes. The first letter arrived in July, postmarked Los Angeles, written in Nova's wide, rushed hand. "I need to see him," it read. "He's still my son." My chest burned as I fed the paper to the kitchen sink's flame. The second came weeks later. "You can't keep him from me forever." That one I burned too, watching the smoke curl like the ghost of her voice. One evening, I found Kai sitting by the trash holding a half-singed envelope I hadn't burned clean. His lips trembled. "She's writing, isn't she? Why don't you let her come?" I knelt, the smell of ash clinging to my shirt. "Because she's not ready to be the mother you deserve, and I won't risk you being hurt again." His eyes searched mine wide and wet. "But what if she changes?" My throat tightened. "Then we'll see. But until then, I won't let her break you." That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed Nova's words, her laughter years ago at family dinners, her hands clutching Kai as a baby. Anger flared, then sorrow, then guilt. Who was I to decide if a mother could reclaim her child? Yet every time doubt rose, I remembered the campsite. His small voice, Mom said, "I'm not wanted." That sentence was a brand. I could never forget it. One afternoon, while Kai napped, Willow came by with peach cobbler. She found the pile of burned letters in the ashtray and touched my arm. "Sometimes, child fire is mercy. But don't let it turn your heart to cinder." Her eyes, clouded by time but still sharp, met mine. "The wind carries all truths eventually. You don't have to chase them." I nodded, but the words clung. That night, I pulled out Gideon's cassette and played it while Kai slept. His guitar wove through the room like a confession. I added my own chords, stronger, layered, promising. I wrote lyrics on a napkin: "I'll keep the fire, I'll keep the ridge, I'll keep the child the wind almost hid." Yet the letters didn't stop. By fall, there were 5 more. I hid them in a shoebox at the back of the closet, a silent grave. Each one threatened to crack the fragile life we'd built. Each one reminded me that promises are tested sometimes by the very people who should have held them first. And though I burned some and buried others, I knew the truth Willow had warned me of. The wind was shifting, and sooner or later it would blow the past back to our door. The leaves in the Blue Ridge turned the color of fire, and I felt the season carrying a warning. Kai had started middle school, his backpack now heavy with books, and his heart heavier still with questions he never stopped asking. Some nights he stood in the kitchen doorway after homework, his voice low. "Do you think she dreams about me?" I always answered carefully, choosing words like stones placed across a river. "She might, but dreams don't always mean action." He frowned, too old for his years. "I don't want to be her dream. I want to be her choice." Those words pressed against me like a weight I couldn't set down. Work picked up. I had landed a commission designing album covers for a local label. Long nights turned into mornings with ink stains on my fingers, Kai's drawings layered over my sketches on the table. But even success felt fragile. Because then came the letter, not to me, but to him. It was tucked in his backpack, slipped between a math worksheet and a flyer for the school play. Written in Nova's hand: "Kai, I miss you. I made mistakes. I want us back." He shoved it into my palm after school, his face pale. "She's everywhere," he whispered. I crushed the paper, but rage burned in me hotter than the autumn air. How had she found a way into his day? Who had given her access? That night, as wind rattled the windows, I phoned Rowan and Sage. My father's voice trembled for the first time in years. "Your sister called us. She says she's changed. She wants to come back." I laughed bitter. Changed. She hasn't even asked Kai what he wants. Sage whispered, "She's still his mother." I slammed the phone down, my breath sharp. Later, Willow sat across from me at the kitchen table, her fingers curled around a mug of tea. "Storm's coming," she said, her gaze steady. "You can't stop wind from finding its way into the cracks. Best you can do is make sure your house is strong." I stared at Kai's sleeping face on the couch, the soft rise and fall of his chest, and thought, my house is him. If the storm came, I would stand between. By November, rumors had spread. Blaze had left Nova. She was back in Asheville, flaunting sobriety and redemption stories. She appeared at the Old Fiddle one night, her eyes locking on mine across the smoky room. She didn't say a word, but her smile cut like a blade. I went home that night, shaking. Kai looked up from his sketchbook. "Was she there?" I nodded, kneeling, so my eyes met his. "Yes. But listen to me, Kai. You are not something to be reclaimed. You are someone who belongs." His small fingers gripped mine. "Then promise me you won't let her take me." I whispered the only truth I had left. "I promise. Not while I breathe." Winter crept in, early snow dusting the ridges, silence heavier than the cold. One evening, headlights swept across the driveway. By the time I reached the porch, Nova was there, wrapped in a wool coat, her hair slick against her cheeks. She didn't knock. She didn't need to. Her voice carried across the yard. "He's my son. You can't keep him locked away." I stepped forward, the air cutting like glass. "He's not locked. He's safe. Safe in a way you never gave him." Her eyes glistened, anger and sorrow fighting inside them. I was broken then. Blaze made me choose. I didn't know how to fight. My throat ached, but I steadied my voice. "And so you left him to freeze in the dark." Behind me, I heard Kai's footsteps. He stood in the doorway, clutching the guitar I'd given him. His voice cracked. "You left me." Nova's knees buckled as though his words were a blow. She reached out, but I blocked her path. "No more," I said, sharp as steel. "You don't get to step back into his life like nothing happened." She looked at me, desperation raw. "Please let me explain to him." Rowan and Sage arrived the next day. The living room turned into a tribunal, fire snapping in the hearth, while old grievances filled the air like smoke. Rowan's voice thundered. "She's his mother. You can't erase that." I faced him, my hands trembling but firm. "I don't want to erase her. But I won't let her wound him again." Sage's eyes brimmed with tears. "Asher, you've carried so much. Maybe too much." I shook my head, my voice breaking. "I'd carry the whole mountain if it meant he never feels abandoned again." Kai sat silent, his gaze moving from one face to another until he finally spoke. "I don't need a mother who comes and goes like the wind. I need someone who stays. And he pointed to me, his voice rising. She's the one who stayed." The room fell into silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire. For the first time, my parents looked at me not with doubt, but with something close to respect. Nova sobbed into her hands. I felt no triumph, only grief for all the years she had thrown away. That night, Kai crawled into my bed, curling beside me like he had when he was 5. "Don't let them take me," he whispered. I held him close, his heartbeat against mine. "They won't," I promised. "Not now. Not ever." But as snow thickened outside, I knew the battle wasn't finished. Families don't break cleanly. They splinter. They bleed. They claw their way back in through every crack. The shadows weren't just at the door. They were already inside, waiting. The new year arrived cold and unforgiving. By January, I found myself sitting at a long oak table in a lawyer's office, fluorescent lights humming overhead. Mira, my friend and attorney, spread papers across the surface, her voice calm but sharp. Nova has filed for custody. She claims she's rehabilitated. Clean record for the past 2 years. Stable income. The court will consider her request seriously. My chest tightened. After 10 years? After the night she left him crying in the woods, Mira's eyes softened. The law doesn't remember wounds. It remembers signatures. I walked home through the brittle winter air, each step crunching on ice, dread clinging to me. Kai met me at the door, his guitar slung over his shoulder like a shield. What did they say? I couldn't tell him the whole truth, not yet. It's going to be hard, I admitted. He nodded, jaw clenched. Then we fight. His words pierced me because he shouldn't have to fight at all. Weeks blurred into hearings, each one chipping away at me. Nova sat across the courtroom in tailored dresses, her hair pulled back, her voice dripping with practiced humility. I was young, lost, manipulated. I never stopped loving him. Her words struck like ice picks, stabbing holes in the silence. Rowan and Sage sat behind her, torn between guilt and loyalty. I stood alone, clutching evidence, photographs of Kai's life, his report cards, his music awards, his drawings that lined our walls like a chronicle of survival. The judge listened, face unreadable. One morning, Nova produced a series of letters, drafts she had written to Kai over the years, never sent. My stomach turned as she read aloud. I dreamed of your laugh, of the boy you'd become. Kai sat beside me, shaking his head. Lies, he whispered, but I saw his shoulders curl inward, doubt sneaking under his skin. At night, I walked the house in darkness, Willow's rocking chair creaking faintly as she dozed by the fire. Her voice broke through the quiet. Truth is heavy, but so is love. You have to decide which one you'll carry to the end. I stared at the embers, wondering if I was strong enough to hold both. Then came the moment I feared most. Nova requested visitation supervised. Kai resisted, but the court approved. I drove him to a sterile room in the county center, walls, pale blue cameras mounted high. Nova entered, trembling hands clutching a photo album. Kai, I kept these pictures of you as a baby. I've always loved you. He stared at her, his small fists clenching. Then why did you leave me screaming in the dark? Her face crumpled, tears falling. The caseworker watched silently, pen scratching notes. I turned away because I couldn't bear the sight of Kai's eyes full of anger, but also the dangerous seed of yearning. That night he slammed his bedroom door, refusing to eat. Through the wood, his voice cut into me. What if she's different now? What if I'm supposed to give her another chance? My own tears slid down my face as I answered, You don't owe her your pain. Not again. But even as I said it, fear gnawed. Maybe the law wouldn't care about pain. Maybe it would decide blood spoke louder than love. February bled into March, the mountains still shrouded in gray. Courtroom battles became a rhythm, each day carving me thinner. Mira pressed on, gathering evidence, witnesses. My friend Tessa testified about Kai's asthma attacks as a child, how I rushed him to the hospital in the dead of night, never once faltering. Willow, frail but fierce, whispered from the stand, That boy's alive because she chose him, not because his mother remembered him. The gallery stirred, but the judge remained stone. Nova's turn came. She spoke of therapy, recovery, redemption. She painted herself as a phoenix rising from ash, her voice breaking at rehearsed intervals. And then the strike, her lawyer unveiled photographs of Nova volunteering at a children's shelter, laughing with kids, her arms around them. The jury of public opinion shifted in the room, though there was no jury at all, only a judge who leaned forward slightly for the first time. My stomach twisted. That night, Kai stormed into the kitchen, eyes wild. Why does she get to look good? Why does everyone clap for her? He slammed his guitar case shut, the sound cracking like thunder. I'm not her charity case. I reached for him, but he pulled back. Sometimes I think I should just go with her. At least then, maybe everyone would stop fighting. His words carved into me deeper than any blade. Kai, don't say that. But he ran upstairs, the thud of his feet echoing like a drumbeat of war. The next morning, he was gone. His bed empty, window cracked. Panic swallowed me whole. I tore through the house, screaming his name, Willow's trembling voice behind me. Check the ridge. I sprinted into the cold breath burning. Hours passed until I found him near the overlook, knees pulled to his chest, staring into the endless drop below. He didn't look up when I reached him. She says she loves me now. You say you love me. But I'm just tired. Tired of being pulled like a rope. I knelt beside him, my tears freezing on my cheeks. You're not a rope, Kai. You're a boy who deserves to be chosen without condition. My hands shook as I held his shoulders. If love is real, it doesn't let go. Not in the woods, not in the courtroom, not ever. He finally turned, his face streaked with tears. Then promise me you'll never let them take me away. I pressed my forehead to his. I promise, even if I have to tear the world apart. We walked back home in silence, but I knew something had changed. The storm had entered us both, leaving fire in our veins. The battle wasn't just legal anymore. It was spiritual, emotional, elemental. And as March winds howled against the house, I realized the final confrontation was drawing near. The mountain had carried us for 10 years. Now it demanded our reckoning. November arrived with its sharp winds and brittle skies, carrying the weight of everything that had been festering for months. The hearings had stalled, the lawyers had traded fire, but tonight was not about courtrooms or judges. Tonight it was just us, family, if the word could still apply. The living room of my mountain house flickered with firelight, shadows leaping across the walls as if even the flames wanted to bear witness. On the table lay papers, contracts, custody documents, the long road of evidence I had built over 10 years. I rose, my hands trembling only slightly, and pressed the remote. The projector hummed to life, casting across the wall a series of emails and postcards Nova had once written to Blaze, the man she chose over her child. The words glared in silence. Kai doesn't fit into the life we want. He'll only weigh us down. Gasps rippled in the room. Rowan's voice broke through, raw with fury. Nova, is this true? For the first time in years, she had no ready smile, no polished defense. Her lips parted, but no words came, only tears burning in her eyes. Sage buried her face in her hands. Dear God, she whispered. The silence stretched heavy and suffocating. I spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. This is why Kai was left in the woods that night. It wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Nova finally broke, her voice rising in jagged desperation. I was young. Blaze pushed me. I thought I couldn't raise him alone. I cut her off, anger sparking through me. Being young doesn't excuse abandoning your child in the cold. The room shook as Kai stood, his voice shattering what was left of our fragile civility. You left me to freeze. Do you know what it's like to scream until your throat bleeds and no one comes? His words struck like lightning. Nova reached for him, but he recoiled. I waited for you for 10 years. 10 years. His face was flushed, tears streaming, but his anger was fire untamed. Before anyone could stop him, he bolted to the porch, the door slamming like a gavel. I followed, heart pounding. Outside, the mountain wind bit cruelly at our skin. I pulled him close, his small frame shaking against mine. I'm here, I whispered into his hair. I won't let you be lost again. He clung to me, sobs breaking free, and in that moment I knew no court, no parent, no bloodline could undo what we had built together. When we returned inside, the air was different. Rowan sat with his head in his hands. For the first time, his booming authority was gone, replaced by quiet regret. I was wrong, he admitted, voice gravelly. I let your mother and I blind ourselves. We wanted to believe family meant loyalty, but it meant silence instead. Sage rose and crossed the room, wrapping me in her arms with trembling resolve. I was afraid you'd fail. afraid of watching you collapse. But all I did was fail you instead. My throat tightened, the words I had longed for, colliding with the ache of years lost. Then Mira entered, carrying a folder stamped with the county seal. She set it before me, her eyes firm. The court has granted full legal guardianship. After 10 years, it's official. No one can take Kai from you. The papers gleamed beneath the firelight, final and irrefutable. I looked at Nova, broken and small in the corner. I wanted to hate her, but the truth was heavier than hate, it was finality. He is safe, I said softly. That's all that matters now. The fire crackled, filling the silence. Outside, the wind tore at the trees, scattering red leaves like fragments of old wounds. And as I stood at the window, Kai's tear-stained face still fresh in my mind, I whispered to myself, the storm has passed, but winter is coming. Forgiveness will not be as swift as justice. December arrived, draped in frost, but my home glowed warm with garlands, wreaths, and the towering pine tree glittering in the corner. The scent of roast meat and baked apples drifted through the air, mingling with the sound of laughter, real laughter, the kind I thought might never return. On Christmas Eve, the mountain house was full, every chair taken, every hand, busy setting dishes and pouring cider. By the fire sat Willow, her memory fragile, her eyes wandering. Tessa tended her, gently placing a knitted blanket over her knees. The crackle of guitar strings filled the room, and Willow's gaze sharpened for a fleeting moment. She hummed a line from an old bluegrass hymn, her voice thin but steady. My chest tightened as I realized music still reached her even when memory failed. At dinner, Rowan rose slowly, glass in hand. His voice was quieter than I had ever known it. To my daughter. For years I doubted you. But tonight I say this. You are the pride of this family. Sage wept openly, her hands clutching mine. I should have said those words long ago. The pain of absence weighed on me, but so did the relief of hearing them at last. Nova arrived late, stripped of her polish. No dress, no jewels, only eyes red-rimmed with sorrow. She approached Kai, voice trembling. I was wrong. I don't expect forgiveness tonight, but I hope for a beginning. Kai's shoulders stiffened, his gaze cutting sharp. I'll give you a chance, he said, then looked at me. But she's not my home. You are. I placed a hand on both their shoulders, my voice low. Family is not something we abandon. Not anymore. The evening shifted. Kai carried his guitar to the center of the room. I wrote something, he said, his voice trembling with pride. He began to play chords soft but certain and sang words that pierced me. The wind carried me, but you held me still. You were my shelter when the mountain was cruel. You are my fire. You are my home. He called the song Aunt of the Wind. My tears fell unchecked, each lyric sealing the bond we had forged in fire and pain. When he finished, silence lingered before applause burst forth. I took my guitar, my hand shaking, and played, Above the Ridge, a song I had written only weeks before. Kai joined, his voice lifting with mine, and the room filled with harmony. The sound of survival turned into something greater. Willow clapped softly, Rowan and Sage held hands across the table. Nova sat bowed, but listening. For the first time in a decade, the house felt whole. Later, as candles burned low, Willow reached out, her voice startlingly clear. Asher, she said, eyes locking on mine. Not Gideon, not the name of the man who once overshadowed me, but my own. You crossed the mountain. Her frail hand gripped mine and tears blurred my vision. Those words, acknowledgement, absolution, were the final gift I had waited for. I stepped onto the porch afterward, the mountain air sharp but bearable. The wind cut across my face, no longer cruel, but cleansing. Behind me, laughter and music spilled from the windows, a glow of fire and family. I whispered into the night. The wind carried me through the darkness. Now I stand on the other side, where firelight holds us together. And for the first time, the mountain no longer felt like a place of loss. It felt like home.